Welcome to Decision Point. Is this region sitting on top of a virtual gold mine of economic prosperity? We're going to continue the discussion today with Bob Cook, who is the president of the Regional Economic Development Corporation for Juarez, El Paso. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Pleasure
Welcome back, I guess.
Good to be here again.
Yeah, right. We really didn't have the chance to get into all of the issues that we wanted to discuss on our last show, and so we want to, first of all, just remind people a little bit about your background and what your organization does, if you could.
Well, I have a private nonprofit organization, staff of 7 people, who has the primary responsibility for growing the El Paso Juarez economy by attracting jobs and attracting investment. And the vast majority of work we do is attracting private companies here. But in 2005, we also were the lead for the region with the Department of Defense for base realignment and closure. So we put together the whole marketing program to get the DoD to grow Fort Bliss.
Right, yeah. And so certainly that's has a huge economic impact, so something that would be very, very important.
The biggest economic event that's ever occurred in the history of this community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one decision by the federal government is now bringing over 20,000 new soldiers here, and the economic impact of Fort Bliss goes from $1.7 billion a year to close to $6 billion a year once this growth is completed.
And what's the projection in terms of the completion of that growth?
Well, we're nearing the end of construction here in early 2012, and so much of what is left is just moving the final brigades into the area.
Yeah.
Combat Aviation Brigade moving in this year, and a lot of new and exciting things happening at Fort Bliss too, in terms of the development of new futuristic technologies that we think are really cool and have a lot of promise for the future.
Well, that's yet another exciting reason to relocate to El Paso, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we're sitting on top of a potential economic gold mine in the whole technology fiber optics industry. You want to recap that for us, and then we'll kind of go into that a little bit more.
Sure. The El Paso area is one of the top 10 or 12 cities in America in terms of just the sheer number of fiber optic backbone that's running through our community from all directions. So we have great connectivity to the rest of the U.S., great connectivity to Mexico and Latin America. And then on top of that, the military presence here has brought in another digital capability through the Joint National Training Capability. And then our universities here are on the Internet 2 network that links many universities across America. And so there are only a small number of communities, maybe 2 or 3, that have what we have in terms of all of that I've just described.
And so potentially research organizations or industries could tap into that if they were located here in some way.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, we've engaged with Cisco Systems about a year ago to help us figure all this out. And we're in the middle of that process as we speak.
So this could potentially mean hundreds, maybe thousands of very high-paying, excellent jobs could develop in this community. That would be the hope?
That's what we hope. I mean, we have this great infrastructure that is honestly very underutilized, and so as we begin to learn how we can better utilize this technology infrastructure, that has to translate to the creation of new jobs.
Right, yeah. And that also, from the standpoint of competitiveness, that this kind of infrastructure isn't something that a community can just decide, oh, we're going to build this kind of an infrastructure like a convention center or something. I mean, this is a very expensive, deeply embedded, unique thing that exists for a variety of complex reasons, right?
That's correct. And our community was not required to make this investment either. We're getting this investment because of a strategic geographic location on the U.S.-Mexico border in a mountain pass, which is the only clear mountain pass in the United States that connects the west to the east.
I didn't know that. That is a unique thing.
Yeah, year-round. I mean, weather will shut down every other mountain pass north of us, but we stay clear year-round. And so all that's big in terms of rail moving through this area, highways moving through this area, fiber optic infrastructure, natural gas pipelines. I mean, there's a reason that all this infrastructure is running through here.
So I need to stop complaining about the increase in traffic on I-10? Well,
I tell Mayor Cook all the time, if I'm doing my job well, traffic congestion will increase.
Okay, there you have it. Now, you just went to the Nobel Peace Prize. You were actually invited as a guest of about 130 people in the world, right?
Correct.
And you encountered some very interesting people there. And one person in particular was a woman who was the highest-ranking Canadian official who's now has her own consulting firm. You want to tell us a little bit about this woman and what she's doing?
Yeah, I can never remember exactly her title, but Jocelyn Bourgogne was the cabinet secretary in charge of all other cabinet secretaries in Canada. And she has now started a private consulting firm that just works with governments around the world to help introduce innovative frameworks, helps introduce technology to help that government be more responsive to its citizenry and to create better job opportunities and better quality of life. So Jocelyn right now is helping 6 different nations around the world to look at how they can improve government. And we hope to announce something very soon that we might be doing specifically with Jocelyn in the future, but I can't go into that right now.
So what if she were to work with El Paso, what kind of thing would she be doing or working with us on in terms of what her organization does?
Well, the same thing that she's doing with 6 governments around the world right now, and that is to help government rethink its role in terms of being more responsive to citizens, more responsive to businesses, and less focused on compliance and regulation and more focused on what can government do to help create jobs and help improve the economy. And so that's what she's focused on, is how you use technology and just changing processes to do that.
Can you give us an example of someone that she's currently working with? Are you that familiar with her work at all? Give us something that we could relate to and understand what she does a little bit better?
No, I think, I'm sure if I had time I could give you an example. I mean, I saw a presentation from her in Oslo, had a private conversation with her, and I'm just impressed with the way she thinks. I mean, she thinks in a very innovative, forward-thinking kind of way. And essentially, I mean, her big idea is that many governments were created in the last century to deal with last century issues. And so now government has to change to deal with the challenges and issues that are in this century.
And certainly we understand, so many of us have encountered the incredible frustration, just even on a personal level, of what it takes to deal with government bureaucracies. And so maybe part of her rethinking process would be to help the city of El Paso, the county of El Paso, the military to really, as you say, be less compliance oriented and less fearful and less red tape oriented and less cautious and a little bit more supportive of business and industry? Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, I think good concepts that she's talking about are that compliance has its place. Rules and regulations have their place. And what governments do a lot of times is not only do they give you the rule that you have to abide by, they give you the process that becomes the only viable way that you can comply with that rule or that law. And so part of what she's saying is don't be so process oriented. You know, have your rule established and allow for the fact that a business person or a private citizen, if they're allowed to use creativity, might come up with hundreds of different ways to comply with that particular ordinance.
So being end result or goal oriented versus process compliance oriented.
There you go. I mean, I think that's a big thing about what she's talking about. And then the other things where you bring in technology is that she clearly sees that private citizens and businesses have value that they can provide to government, that there's actually value that can be created if government listens to its citizens, if government listens to its businesses, that they can learn best practices or a different way of doing things. And so, you know, part of her big message is that if governments are less compliance oriented, and then they realize that there are people outside of government that can add value to what's going on inside of government, and government will focus on things like how they're helping jobs to be created, how they're helping grow the tax base or improve quality of life for citizenry. What she's saying is that governments that think in that manner are going to create more jobs and create a better quality of life for their citizens.
Several years ago, I actually worked with a Ted Gabler, who wrote the book Entrepreneurial Government about maybe 25 years ago.
Okay.
And he was trying to communicate this message, and it's kind of run its course. So it's wonderful to see someone who has rethought this for this century, utilizing technology, also with the gravitas, if you will, to be able to influence governments on the national level.
Let me tell you, I want to bring this lady to El Paso. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in Oslo, I had the opportunity to meet several Nobel Prize winners, listen to their presentations, hear from heads of state from all over the world, and the most impressive and inspirational discussion that I had inside of these meetings was with this lady. I mean, she's just bringing a perspective that I think is needed.
Well, we want to have her on the show if you get her here.
Okay.
So, okay, that would be fabulous. Why should she come and work with El Paso?
Well, I think, if you're following the media right now,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a recent report that came out that we need to do better in economic development and how we coordinate it in the region today. And I think the timing could be perfectly to have someone like Jocelyn come in and help us really think through what government's role is in all of that.
I saw that in the newspaper, read about it a little bit, and that whole coordinating effort has suffered quite a bit, but it seems like your organization has been working amongst a lot of different agencies, businesses, and governments.
Well, the truth is that we've been one of the few stable economic development organizations in the community. I mean, we have a very simple mission, that's to recruit new jobs and investment, and so we've stayed focused on that for the last 7 years. And we've seen a lot of the other economic development groups around us on both sides of the border continue to change, and so that it's been very challenging from our perspective to try to maintain a steady course when you've got all this instability all around you in all these other organizations.
Right. And so that is what inhibits the communication and the partnerships and that sort of thing.
It does. But let me say this. I mean, sometimes it takes having a lot of negative things out there in the public to help get people focused on the right thing to do. And I think we're focused on the right thing to do as a community. And I believe here in the next few months that we're going to come out of this with a new structure and governance that's going to really work well for the citizens of this region.
Well, that's exciting. And one of the interesting things about Decision Point is we don't only look at things from the world's perspective and the economic perspective, but we also look at things from the spiritual perspective. You're a man of faith, you're a Sunday school teacher, and a faithful attender of church. Let's just step back and say, okay, from a spiritual perspective, what do you think is happening here in El Paso, Juarez right now?
Wow, what a big question. I mean, let's first talk about Juarez. I think we make a mistake as individuals and as individual believers if we believe that what's happening in Juarez is all about Juarez. Number one, what's happening in Juarez is happening throughout Mexico. But the battle, it's well written about, and there'll be movies and books, because I'm already talking to those people that are writing, movies and books about what's happening in Mexico. But the focus shouldn't be on Juarez specifically. We need to pray daily for what's going on there for peace. But we might forget the fact that the reason that those cartels exist in Mexico is because we have a very big addiction problem in the United States. And so really where the warfare is taking place at its root is inside families and homes in the United States that are struggling with addiction because those cartels exist to provide that market here in the U.S. And so there is a spiritual battle going on with families across the United States that's creating the demand for drugs. And these cartels are fulfilling that demand. And I'm not giving these cartels a pass at all.
They're evil.
But this is spiritual warfare that's being waged in the United States that we have to be praying about on a daily basis.
Because the fact of the matter is that the cartels, no matter how, even although I'm not saying that the fence is a bad idea or anything, but they're always going to figure out a way to meet the demand that's here. So even though we can slow the demand, as long as there is a demand here, we're going to have this is a big issue for
No,
us.
that's right. But even the talk of supply and demand, which is an important discussion, we can't lose sight of the spiritual battle
Right.
that's going on here. I mean, I'm thinking about the Old Testament is replete with stories where the nation of Israel was in the midst of a battle where even though they may have had strong forces, lots of weaponry, where the Israeli forces realized in the midst of battle that there's no way that they were going to be able to win the victory with a show of force. Then they cried out to God for help.
Right.
And so I think you've got a lot of people inside of Mexico right now that are in the midst of this battle on a daily basis that are crying out to God, and that's the ultimate solution is going to come there.
So one point of prayer for our viewers would be to win the spiritual battle against addiction, against the whole violence and that whole lifestyle and mindset that creates the need for drugs and all the rest of it, human trafficking and the whole bit.
I think that's well said. I mean, to pray specifically for families and individuals in America, because this is where most of the demand is. I mean, we have a lot of people in this country that are broken physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and so that's in my opinion where the most significant battlefield is today. That's going to change what's happening in Mexico. If we can win that battle on this side of the border in families.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this side of the border in El Paso. I mean the drug addiction is not here necessarily. It's throughout the U.S.
El Paso is simply the conduit,
That's right,
the
we're a
gateway.
transshipment point.
It's not all happening here. What a huge percentage of the drugs and human trafficking actually does come through the border in El Paso, but it passes through. It doesn't stay
Going
here.
somewhere else.
Yeah. In terms of the safety issue, I think that the whole people have a misconception about what is happening in Juarez right now. Isn't there a change in the level of violence that's going on? You want to talk about that a little bit?
So where we sit here today in early 2012, the estimates are that the violence today, or the actual homicides that are occurring on a daily basis, are about 1/3 of where they were a year ago. Now,
That's a huge change.
no, it is. And I think it's now where we can say it looks like a trend. That it's a trending downward, but it's still unacceptably high.
Sure.
And we believe that the fact that the Juarez economy, from an industrial perspective, is performing better than most economies in Mexico, that's playing a role in placing a downward pressure on this violence. I mean, there's more and more opportunity that's being created in the city of Juarez.
And so the economic prosperity, the presence and the bringing in of industry and business to Juarez and El Paso is a strong contributing factor in lessening the violence.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a contributing factor, and it's hard to say how strong it is, but I'll tell you that the attitude of our staff at Redco is that the role that we play in this whole security situation in the region is that creating jobs are important and will help improve security. So we do believe that we're having an impact. We've helped bring about 14,000 new jobs. Our organization has about 14,000 new jobs to Juarez in the last 3 years. And so we believe we are playing a role.
Yeah. Now, if you look at this, then there would be a second prayer point here, I think, related to the economic prosperity of this region. How do you want people to pray for the economic prosperity, the economic opportunities for this area?
Well, I have two thoughts about that. One that I've known for years, being 30 years in this business, that if people's hearts are changed, if God is able to penetrate the heart of an individual and change that individual becomes a better dad, a better husband, a better worker. And so
there is a relationship there.
No,
sure.
Absolutely. And so I think, as people become people of faith and are dedicated to Christ, then that has a very direct impact on on the opportunities that we can bring to this region. I mean, we want more productive workers. We want stronger families and with better husbands and dads. And so specifically, let's pray for those people that are all around us that need Christ, because that transformation will help improve the economy.
And we know that, statistically speaking, from all of the history of revival throughout the centuries, where revival occurs, where people find Christ in significant numbers, it dramatically impacts all of the social issues.
Absolutely.
And all of the economic issues, all of those kinds of things have a huge impact on all of that. And so if getting back to the whole fiber optics network and that kind of thing, what are some of the barriers that we can pray about or pray against to keep that from being utilized to its full potential and going forth?
Well, that is an excellent question. And let me take it beyond fiber optics. I think one of the things that believers should be praying for are the decisions that our leaders are making about the future of this region. I mean, pray for me. I mean, I have the responsibility of growing the economy. Pray for Mayor Murguia in Juarez. Pray for Mayor Cook in El Paso, for Judge Escobar in El Paso, for our school leaders. And pray that we would all gain sight that we are all in this boat together, and that we would put personal agendas aside and organizational agendas aside and work together in a collaborative fashion to help create the best possible opportunities for this region. Because the fact of the matter is that government needs us in private sector. We need government. And Juarez needs El Paso today more than ever.
Right.
And there will be coming a time too, I believe, and these things can be cyclical, where El Paso is going to be in a position where we absolutely want the support of Juarez. And so I think a really good prayer is to pray for the decisions of leadership and that we would all make decisions collaboratively.
And sometimes that can be a challenge because of agendas, but it's something which is possible.
Hey, we're all humans, and
Right.
so I'm amazed all the time that, and I talk to my Sunday school class all the time about this, that why in the world God would pick imperfect human beings to be responsible for making sure that His message gets shared from generation to generation. Because He has a whole lot of perfect things that He could do.
Yeah, sure.
But He chooses us, and
Right.
so we're imperfect human beings and always don't do the right thing, and so we need daily prayer and just making decisions.
Right. Now, in one of the other things that people have some fears about is the whole Latino community, Latino influence in terms of being able to merge the cultures and work together as one, both El Paso and Juarez. But there are actually a number of things about the Latino community and the value system that are very positive and actually give us an advantage. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Man, this is a big part of the advantages of this community, that when we talk to corporate decision makers from around the world, one of the things that we talk about is this notion of mi casa es su casa, my house is your house. To much of the world, they may think that is nothing more than just a silly little phrase, but it is a part of the Hispanic culture to be welcoming, open, warm, loving people. And that's a big part of our culture that we sell. I mean, I'm the minority here and have a very significant position of responsibility within this community. And I feel blessed that I have it, but I feel like it's this warm Hispanic culture that allows this sort of thing to happen. So I think that's one of the things that is a significant selling point to this region. And let me talk about this. We are 82% Hispanic in this community. In the next 40 years, the Hispanic demographic is projected to grow 180% in the United States. African Americans at about 70%, Anglos at about 30%. And so today, El Paso looks like what much of America is going to look like 40 years from now. And so we're selling that as an advantage. That if you want to get, if a drug company, pharmaceutical company, wants to get insight into what America is going to be like 40 years from now, then we believe there's no better place than El Paso today to be doing research and development and looking at health issues that particularly impact Hispanics.
Right.
And I can go on and on. I mean, my wife and I love the language and culture. I love it in my office that three people can be having a conversation, one speaking English, the other one in Spanish, and the third one starts a sentence in English and ends it in Spanish.
Yeah,
and
I
we
speak
just communicate.
Spanglish, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But that's a skill
Yeah.
that we're marketing to the world right
Yeah.
now.
That is a very interesting thing, and the other thing that I've observed in my time here in El Paso, it certainly is a welcoming community unlike any other, and I've lived all over the United States.
Very warm.
But the other thing is the unique take on family values, the commitment, the stability of the community. I mean, wouldn't you say that people in El Paso are committed to their families, they're committed to the community, they're committed to the region in an extraordinary way?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, we see that. I mean, we have an unacceptably high rate of teen pregnancy, out of wedlock, and a lot of single parent homes in this community that we need to, need to really pray about that as well.
Yeah, sure. That's another.
But by and
prayer,
large,
yeah.
but I think the vast majority of what goes on in this community, you've just nailed it. That very strong family orientation, very strong premium on education,
Yes.
as well, and we just need to continue to leverage that culture to our advantage.
So there is a lot of positive component here, and one of the things that I think also we need to pray about is the ability to be able to work as a community, both Latino, Anglo, and all the other communities that are also part of El Paso, which we have numerous Syrian communities and all kinds of other communities that work together here, and that also provides a gateway and a window of what the future is going to look like in I think the rest of the United States.
That's a very good point. We have about 400 companies from all over the world with a major presence in our region. Mm-hmm. One of the largest concentrations of Taiwanese investment and Taiwanese population in North America is right here in our community. And we have a Taiwanese Chamber of Commerce.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I mean,
there you go.
Yeah, and we have companies from Germany, from France, from the UK, from Japan, from Korea, from China, and it's just this interesting blend of cultures that we have here, where the U.S.-Mexico border has its own unique culture just between the U.S. and the Mexican citizenry. Right. And now you start introducing all of these third-party countries that I've just talked about. It's just, we're a microcosm of what's going on in the world right now, and it's really exciting to be where we are today.
Right. So, in closing, what are two things that we can be praying about that you want to reemphasize for us to propel this whole renaissance forward?
Well, pray for me and other decision makers in the region that we make the right decisions for the economy, for education, for a lot of different things. And then let's just pray for families, not only in this community in El Paso, but our sister city in Juarez and throughout America, that God would have His way, would take hold in those families, so that we see less addiction and these other things that are having such a negative impact on society today.
So we can maximize the positive and minimize the negative.
That's the goal.
Yeah, right. Bob, thank you so much for
my
being
pleasure.
with us. It's been very enlightening, and I hope
Had
that we'll
fun.
see more of you.
I hope so too.
Okay, great. So what do you think? Do you think El Paso, Juarez are on the cusp of a renaissance? And how can we be praying about that? Please let us know what you think and connect with us on all the social medias, and we want to thank you very much for watching.